Hey guys, what's going on? I just watched the gameplay showcase for Resident Evil Requiem, where they go into more detail from the eyes of Grace and Leon, and I really enjoyed seeing what the game had to offer. As always, Capcom knows how to set the mood, with the suffocating atmosphere, enemies that retain a bit of their humanity, and the deep lore implications. It's definitely going to be a good year for Resident Evil fans. But as I watched it again, this time without the rose-colored glasses, I had a thought lingering in the back of my mind, and like a bug buzzing by your ear, I couldn't ignore it. It's the overall gameplay. Now, before anyone jumps in the comments screaming, "Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about," this is not a critique, but more so a mild concern. So, RE9 director Koshi Nakanishi explained that we'll be having two different playstyles. Grace's gameplay will be like Resident Evil 2 and 7, navigating throughout dark, creepy areas that overwhelm you with anxiety from the atmosphere alone. And just like 2 and 7, you'll have to pick your battles wisely with very limited resources, giving us that old school Resident Evil experience. Leon, on the other hand, is a lot more action-focused, much like Resident Evil 4. Popping headshots and kneecaps before giving them the heavenly kick from hell. And it looks like Leon is aura farming any chance he gets with these clean finishers. Sin City wasn't made for you. In Nakanishi's own words, it's like you're playing completely different games with Grace and Leon. And as someone who enjoyed RE2 and RE4, I'm all for it, but that doesn't take away the potential risk of having two distinct styles in one game. Those who enjoyed the classic games relish in the never-ending horror that creeped around every corner while solving tough puzzles. This slow and methodical gameplay kept them engaged from start to finish, and playing RE7 brought them back to 1998 when life was a lot simpler. And those who love RE4 and RE8 felt the never-ending thrill of being an overpowered badass mowing down dozens of enemies with more guns than Robert Kendo. At that point, you gotta ask, who's the real monster here? The bloodthirsty creatures, or you? And while Requiem is making its rounds, I heard that it's a game for Resident Evil fans. And while that sounds good in marketing, I don't fully understand what that means. Because as a franchise that's had drastic changes throughout its life, for better or for worse, it has many types of fans across the board, especially with the recent remakes that brought even more people into the fold. And I'm not one to gatekeep anything. I'm really glad the remakes brought more attention to the franchise. Hell, I'm hoping for an RE5 remake. But with a broader audience brings a burden of having to appeal to more people. And when trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Of course, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I can't deny the possibility. Especially since we'll be jumping back and forth between Grace and Leon, in which players are going to prefer one playstyle over the other. The only game I remember doing something similar was RE4, where you took a break from Leon's run and gun gameplay to a more grounded approach when playing as Ashley, stealthier segments and problem solving. And whether you played the original or the remake, did you truly look forward to playing as Ashley, however short it was? If you did, that's perfectly fine, but I don't imagine the majority of players excited for those segments. With the success of RE2 and RE4 remake, along with RE7 and RE8, combining these playstyles under one game makes sense on paper, but does that run the risk of players not enjoying the full game if they prefer one character over the other, rushing through one playstyle just to get to the other one? Clearly, it won't be as bad as The Last of Us Part 2, where we wanted to play as Ellie again when we were suddenly playing as Abby, despite her having the more spectacular set pieces throughout the game. And I understand that issue was more story-driven than gameplay. Even so, that's something to still consider, because in a world where gaming is a very expensive hobby, you have to go in with optimistic caution. Nothing is guaranteed until you're playing that game. You want a prime example? Look no further than Metroid Prime 4, a game that was 8 years in the making, and 18 years for those who love the Prime trilogy. Coming off the heels of Metroid Dread, this was probably one of the most anticipated games of 2025, but because they were trying to appeal to a wider audience by going open world, which is the complete opposite of a Metroidvania, they put their core fanbase on the back burner while chasing down newcomers. I've seen neglected housewives treated way better than that. Just like Nintendo, Capcom is capable of pushing out banger after banger with these games, but they also make mistakes every once in a while. And just like Nintendo's Metroid Other M, Resident Evil 6 was very ambitious and trying to appeal to everyone. It was too much, to the point that they had to backtrack and revitalize their roots with RE7. Of course, at the end of the day, it's just my opinion, something I couldn't ignore, but an opinion nonetheless. And this is by no means a video to discourage you from getting Requiem. I've already pre-ordered it, and I'll be at GameStop on day one. But it is something to consider when going into this, because you want to be careful of where your cash is going when it comes to gaming. On a side note, I don't know how old Leon is at this point, but I love the brief pauses in between his kicks, as if his age is finally catching up to him. I don't know if that's intentional or what, but it's funny to think about it that way. Also, this isn't the RE video I mentioned from my community post a few days ago. That video is still in the works. I just had to talk about this real quick. But what are your thoughts on the showcase and the two different playstyles? And as always, thank you so much for watching, and please, feel free to like, subscribe, and join the conversation. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.